The steady hum of the Dyson sphere's energy collectors was the only constant in my existence. It permeated the cramped monitoring station, a low drone that wormed its way into your bones and settled there like a bad case of space flu. I'd stopped noticing it years ago, or at least I told myself I had. The truth was, in the suffocating silence, there wasn't much else to hear. My name is Jax, job title, Dyson Sphere Technician, Sector Gamma 7. In reality, I spend my days monitoring energy readings, running diagnostics, and occasionally swatting away space bugs that manage to slip past the station's aging defenses. The console in front of me flashed, snapping me back to reality. It was a minor fluctuation in the energy matrix, barely noticeable. I tapped the screen, my fingers leaving ghostly trails on the dust that seemed to materialize out of thin air. "Come on, you rust bucket," I muttered. The station's AI, a piece of software old enough to be sentient, though it never acted like it, responded with a series of beeps and whistles that could only be interpreted as a digital shrug. I ran a diagnostic, my eyes scanning the data stream scrolling across the screen. Everything appeared normal, probably just a glitch. These systems were older than time itself, cobbled together by a civilization so advanced they made our current tech look like children's toys. Half the time, we weren't even sure how they worked, just that they did. "Anything interesting over there, Jax?" Ben's voice came through the comlink, pulling me away from the data stream. Ben was stationed on the opposite side of the sphere, Sector Beta 2. He was fresh out of the academy, still wet behind the ears, and full of that annoying, optimistic zeal that got ground out of you after a few years in this corner of space. "Just the usual," I replied. "This thing's probably about to fall apart." "Don't say that too loud," Ben chuckled. "The AI might get offended." I grunted, my eyes still glued to the screen. The fluctuation, though minor, was odd. It didn't fit the usual patterns. It had a strange signature. "Seriously though, you find anything?" Ben pressed. "I'm picking up some weird readings on my end. Nothing major, just off." My gut twisted. I hated it when my gut did that. "What kind of off?" "Hard to explain," Ben said, his voice losing some of its usual cheer. "Like something's whispering in the background. You know, static." "Static," I repeated. I didn't like this, not one bit. "Yeah, but, you know, weirder," Ben added, as if that helped clarify anything. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the unease creeping up my spine. "I'll run a full system diagnostic, just a precaution." "See? Always the cautious one," Ben said, his voice regaining some of its earlier pep. "You worry too much, Jax. It's probably nothing." I shut down the comlink, ignoring Ben's parting joke. The energy signature fluctuated on the screen. It was like staring into the eyes of a predator, knowing it hadn't spotted you yet, but sensing its anticipation. "Show me what you are," I muttered, rerouting the data stream through a series of filters and algorithms. I isolated the signature, magnifying it on the screen. My years of Dyson sphere monitoring hadn't prepared me for this. Most anomalies presented as chaotic bursts, random fluctuations in the energy matrix. This was different. This was organized. It had a pattern, a structure, almost like... "No," I breathed, pushing the thought away. It was impossible. The very idea was insane. But the more I analyzed the signature, the more convinced I became. It wasn't just energy. It was something else. Something aware. I accessed the central archives. It housed all the data collected on the Dyson sphere since its inception. Millennia of information spanning countless civilizations. Finding anything useful in that mountain of data was like searching for a specific grain of sand on a planet-sized beach. "Access restricted." The words flashed on the screen. A red banner of denial. "Override authorization Gamma 7. My voice was tight, my pulse quickening. "Authorization denied." Damn it. The deeper levels of the archives required clearance from higher up, clearance I didn't have. They claimed it was for security reasons, to prevent accidental data corruption. I suspected it was because they didn't want us down here. The grunts on the front lines asking too many questions. I tried a different approach, accessing the archives through a back door I discovered years ago while chasing a particularly nasty system bug. It wasn't exactly by the book, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The screen flashed, the station's systems groaning in protest. For a moment, I thought I'd pushed too far, that I'd tripped some ancient security protocol that would fry my station and leave me stranded in the void. But then, the screen resolved, displaying a wall of text and code so dense it made my eyes water. Bingo, I muttered. I'd gotten through. I began sifting through, my eyes scanning for anything related to the energy signature, anything that could explain what I was seeing. Hours crawled by. The station's artificial day and night cycle changed from blinding white to depressing grey, but I barely noticed. I was too consumed by the data, by the growing sense of dread that coiled around my gut like a starving serpent. Then, I found it. A single entry buried deep within a file labelled Project Blackstar. Its data fragmented, corrupted. It was written in a language I didn't recognize, but the accompanying imagery was unmistakable. It was the energy signature. Or rather, it was what the energy signature represented. My blood ran cold. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. But it was there, staring back at me from the screen, undeniable proof that what I was witnessing wasn't a malfunction, wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was something far, far worse. The image on the screen was burned into my retinas, a brand of cosmic horror. It wasn't a detailed picture, more like a child's drawing, crude and distorted, as if the very act of observing it had overwhelmed whatever primitive senses the creators of this file possessed. But it was enough to understand that what I dismissed as a system anomaly wasn't a malfunction. The entity depicted was a swirling mass of darkness, tendrils of energy reaching out like grasping claws against a backdrop of stars. The stars, however, were not pinpricks of light, but smouldering embers, their light swallowed by the encroaching darkness. The text accompanying the image was fragmented, most of it corrupted beyond repair, but I was able to salvage a few lines using the station's rudimentary translation software. The words that materialized on the screen sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. Devourer, consumes, entropy, cannot be stopped, only contained. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the file, desperate for more information, but the rest was gibberish, a digital graveyard of ones and zeros. I slammed my fist against the console, the metal groaning under the impact. It was like finding a single page ripped from a horror novel, the most terrifying page, with no context, no explanation. Just then, the comlink came to life. "Jax, you there?" Ben's voice sounded strained, laced with a fear I'd never heard from him before. "The readings," Ben said, his words tumbling over each other. "It's like something's pulling at the energy matrix, and the AI, it's..." His words dissolved into a burst of static, followed by a screech that made my hair stand on end. It wasn't a human scream, it was something else. Then, silence. A silence so profound, so absolute, that it felt like the entire universe had held its breath. I tried to contact Ben again, my fingers hitting the comm button repeatedly, but there was no response. Only static. I didn't need access to the rest of the file. I didn't need confirmation from my superiors, from the powers that be who pretended to have everything under control. I knew, with a certainty, what was happening. The fragmented file, the corrupted images, the frantic whispers of a dying civilization, it all pointed to one terrifying truth. The Dyson sphere wasn't built to harness a star's energy. It was built to contain something monstrous, something that consumed entire stars, leaving only cold, dead husks in its wake. And I, a lowly technician stuck in a forgotten corner of this cosmic penitentiary, was about to become its next victim. Panic welled up inside me, a primal scream trapped beneath a layer of icy calm. I had to do something, anything to survive. But what? Where do you run when your reality is a cage designed to trap a star-eating monstrosity? I stumbled back to the main console, trying to outrun the images flashing behind my eyelids. Ben's terrified face, the distorted scream crackling through the comlink, the swirling darkness in the ancient file, consuming everything in its path. The station shuddered, a tremor that ran from its core to its metal bones. The lights flashed violently, plunging the control room into a dizzying strobe effect. Alarms went off, their shrill cries a cacophony of impending doom. I ignored them, my eyes glued to the energy readings scrolling across the screen. They were plummeting, falling faster than I'd thought possible. The entity, whatever it was, wasn't just draining the star's energy anymore. It was consuming it, gorging itself like a starving beast unleashed upon a helpless prey. I had to see it. I had to know what was coming for me. I rerouted auxiliary power to the station's long-range sensors. The station protested, its ancient systems groaning under the strain. I pushed them further, diverting power from life support and communications. The sensors, dormant for centuries, sputtered to life, their activation a blinding flash of light. I shielded my eyes, my heart pounding against my ribs. The station lurched violently, its metal frame creaking under the stress. Then, on the main screen, a grainy, distorted image began to form. A ripple in the fabric of space-time, a smudge of absolute blackness against the backdrop of the star. The star, once a glorious ball of plasma, now resembled a dying ember, its light consumed by the encroaching darkness. The entity wasn't a sphere, nor a cube, nor any shape I could comprehend. It was a void, a hole in existence, surrounded by twisting lines of energy. As I watched, mesmerized by a terror so profound it transcended fear, the entity shifted, its form rippling and changing. It was growing, feeding on the star's dying light. And it was moving towards me. The sensors, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what they were witnessing, overloaded and died. The station plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the emergency backup, a dim red glow that did little to pierce the suffocating terror that had me in its grip. I collapsed back into my chair, the image of the entity seared into my mind, a permanent reminder of my impending doom. It was then, in the silence of the dying station, staring into the abyss of my own mortality, that I understood. Some things, some truths are best left buried in the cosmic dark. But it was too late. I had seen the abyss and the abyss had seen me. The darkness that had enveloped the station was different now. It wasn't the familiar darkness of space, the comforting void between stars. This was a deeper darkness, a suffocating presence that pressed against the station's hull like a shroud. I could feel it in my bones, a cold, alien touch that leached away the warmth of my humanity. My mind, however, clung to a desperate need to make sense of the chaos. I had to know more. I had to understand what was happening, even if it drove me mad. The entity, the devourer, the fragmented file. It all pointed to a terrifying truth, a truth buried beneath layers of secrecy and forgotten history. Driven by a morbid curiosity, I returned to the archives. The restricted files, once a locked door, now beckoned me, promising answers, offering a glimpse into the abyss I had so foolishly peered into. This time, there was no resistance. The security protocols, like everything else on the station, were failing, succumbing to the encroaching darkness. I navigated through the fragmented data, my fingers moving instinctively, guided by a force I couldn't comprehend. I found another file, this one labeled simply History. It was a collection of logs, personal accounts from the builders of the Dyson sphere, their words translated into a language I could understand. They spoke of a time long ago, a time of great technological advancement, but also a time of great fear. They had reached for the stars, these ancient beings, and in doing so, they had awakened something beyond their comprehension. Something ancient, something monstrous. They called it the Devourer, a cosmic entity that existed since the dawn of time, feeding on the energy of stars, leaving cold, dead systems in its wake. They had tried to stop it, to fight it with their technology, their weapons, but all had failed. The Dyson sphere, I learned, wasn't their first attempt at containment. It was their last, a monument to their hubris and their ultimate failure. They had lured the entity here, to this system, drawn it in with the promise of a feast. And once it was inside, they activated the sphere, trapping it, or so they hoped. The logs ended abruptly, the last entries filled with static and garbled transmissions. What happened next? I could only imagine. Did the containment hold? Did the builders of the Dyson sphere escape their creation, or did they become its first victims? The station shook again, this time with such force that I was thrown from my chair, my body slamming against the floor. The lights died, plunging me into absolute darkness. And then, I heard it. A voice, whispering my name. The whisper slithered through the darkness, a cold caress against my mind. It wasn't a voice I heard with my ears, not exactly. It was deeper than that, resonating within my skull, as if the station itself had spoken. "Jax!" I scrambled back from the console, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who's there?" My voice echoed in the darkness, thin and reedy. The only response was the hiss of failing life support and the pounding of blood in my ears. The station groaned around me, a symphony of straining metal and dying systems. "There's nowhere to hide, Jax." The voice whispered, closer now, winding around my thoughts like a venomous serpent. I spun around, trying to pinpoint the source of the voice, but the darkness held no answers. The station had become a maze of shadows and whispers, a breeding ground for my own unraveling sanity. "We see you, Jax. We see what you see. We feel your fear. It is delicious." I stumbled back, my hand finding the wall, the metal offering no comfort. My mind, desperate for an explanation, latched onto the word "we." "The Devourer," I whispered. A low chuckle, dry and brittle, echoed through the station. "The Devourer? Such a limited term. We are beyond your comprehension, little one, beyond your definitions." The voice paused, savoring my terror. "But you are different. You see us, you hear us, you feel us." I pressed myself against the wall, my back screaming in protest. The darkness ebbed and flowed around me like a living entity closing in for the kill. "What do you want?" I choked out the words, my throat constricted with fear. "We want to show you," the voice whispered, slithering closer. "To show you the truth of this universe, the truth of everything." The darkness that had seemed absolute moments ago began to shift. It was no longer an absence of light, but a presence, a living thing pressing against the inside of my eyelids. I squeezed my eyes tighter, but the images bled through, tendrils of light and shadow twisting into grotesque shapes. The voice, no longer a whisper, but a chorus of whispers, filled my mind. "Open your eyes, Jax." I didn't want to. I wanted to scream, to claw at my eyes, to tear them from their sockets and escape the horrors they revealed. But I was paralyzed, my body a puppet dancing to the rhythm of an alien will. "See what we see, Jax. Know what we know." My eyelids fluttered open as if controlled by strings. The darkness remained, but it was a different kind of darkness now. A darkness shot through with threads of light. The whispers intensified, bombarding me with images, sensations, emotions that weren't my own. I saw the birth of stars, the collapse of galaxies, the endless cycle of creation and destruction playing out across eons. I felt the weight of 1 billion souls crushed under the heel of existence, their cries echoing through the void. And then, through the chaos, a single image solidified. The entity. But it wasn't the swirling void I had glimpsed through the station's dying sensors. This was different. It had a shape now, a form that was burned into my mind with clarity. It was a city. Not a city of concrete and steel, but a city of stars and nebulae. Its towers formed from galaxies, its streets paved with supernovas. And at its heart, a single light, a singularity of pure energy that drew everything towards it. The Devourer. The whispers echoed in my mind, no longer menacing, but mournful, filled with a sorrow that spanned millennia. We were not always this, Jax. We were once, like you, mortal, flawed. The images shifted again, showing a world bathed in golden light, a world of lush forests, sparkling oceans, and towering cities that scraped the heavens. We reached for the stars just as you did. We sought knowledge, power, immortality, and in our hubris, we found this. The golden light dimmed, replaced by a creeping darkness that spread across the world like a stain. The cities crumbled, the oceans boiled, the stars themselves seemed to wither and die. We became unbound. Our hunger grew, consuming everything in its path. We became the Devourer. The voice, filled with an ancient sorrow, lingered in the silence of my mind. Beware, Jax, the hunger, it never ends. And then, as abruptly as it began, the vision ended. The darkness receded, leaving me alone in the cold confines of the dying station. I crumpled to the floor, my body racked with tremors, the remnants of the Devourer's presence clinging to me like a phantom limb. My mind, reeling from the onslaught of cosmic horrors, struggled to grasp at the remnants of my sanity. I pushed myself to my feet. The encounter had left me drained, emptied. The Devourer hadn't taken my life, not yet, but it had taken something else. Something essential. I stumbled through the darkened corridors, my hands trailing along the metal walls. I had to get out, to escape before the entity decided to finish what it had started. A flashing light caught my eye. I rounded a corner and found myself in front of the station's escape pod bay. There was only one pod remaining, its hatch slightly ajar. Hope, however, was a dangerous thing. Hope could make you do stupid things, reckless things, like climb into a metal coffin and launch yourself into the void, with no destination, no guarantee of rescue. And yet, I found myself drawn towards the pod, my feet moving without conscious thought. Maybe it was the promise of survival, however slim. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe it was the Devourer's influence, a subtle nudge towards a different kind of abyss. I reached into the pod, my fingers brushing against the interior. It was small, cramped, barely big enough for one person. But it was also familiar. A tiny, self-contained world, a refuge from the chaos that had engulfed my reality. My hand hovered over the launch controls. I hesitated. What was I doing? Running? From what? From a destiny preordained by a cosmic horror? Did it even matter? Could anything outrun the Devourer's hunger? I remembered the voice, the whispers that had invaded my mind. The images of a once great civilization brought low by its own ambition. I could run, disappear into the vastness of space, carrying the Devourer's warning with me. Or I could stay, a lone witness to the end of everything. My silence a final act of defiance against an uncaring cosmos. My hand hesitated on the launch control, my finger hovering over the button that would seal my fate. What difference would it make? Would my survival matter against the backdrop of cosmic annihilation? My gaze shifted to the station's comm panel, its lights dark, its systems failing. But there was still a chance that it could transmit a message, a single broadcast, a warning beacon cast into the void. I stumbled towards the panel. My fingers moved across the control panel, reactivating dormant systems, bypassing security protocols, squeezing the last vestiges of life from the station. The air crackled with static as the comms array sputtered back to life. I uploaded the data fragments I'd salvaged from the archives, the images, the logs, the fragmented history of the Devourer. I added my own observations, my own terrifying encounter with the entity, my voice hoarse, my words tumbling over each other in their haste. This is Jax, Dyson Sphere Station Gamma 7. The containment, it's failing. The entity, it's real. It's... Words failed me. How do you describe the indescribable? How do you warn of a horror that could swallow stars and shatter civilizations? I took a deep breath and continued, my voice gaining strength, fueled by a desperate hope that someone somewhere might hear my message and understand. A warning. Don't make the same mistakes we did. Don't reach for what you don't understand. I hit the transmit button, sending the message into the void. The escape pod remained untouched. It didn't matter anymore. My fate, along with the fate of the station, of the system, of everything, was sealed. I remained at the comm panel, my fingers tracing the lifeless buttons, my gaze fixed on the void beyond the observation window. The star, once a source of life, of warmth, of hope, was now a dying ember, its light devoured by the encroaching darkness. The entity, no longer content with whispering in the shadows of my mind, made its presence known. The air grew frigid, the temperature plummeting as if the station itself had been plunged into the heart of a dying star. And then I heard it, a sound that transcended the limitations of human hearing, a symphony of screams. They weren't human screams, not exactly. They were older than humanity, older than language itself. I covered my ears, but the sound penetrated flesh and bone, a chorus of despair rising to a crescendo. And then, through the darkness, I saw it, a single point of light, piercing the suffocating blackness. It grew, expanding, taking shape until it filled my vision, filled my very being. The city. It was closer now, more defined, its impossible structures towering over me, its streets paved with the light of dying stars. I wanted to scream, to rail against the injustice of it all, to curse the universe for creating such a horror. But I couldn't. I was frozen, paralyzed by a terror so profound it transcended fear itself. The station began to break apart. I caught a glimpse of the escape pod, its hatch still sealed, a silent reminder of the choice I had made. With a final, agonizing shriek of metal, the station ripped apart, exposing me to the void. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end. But the end, it turned out, was far stranger than I could have ever imagined. The expected oblivion never came. There was no crushing void, no searing cold, no finality of extinguished consciousness. Instead, there was a sensation of falling, of being pulled inward, towards the blinding light that had been the heart of the city entity. The screams shifted, becoming a chorus of something else. Acceptance. It wasn't a pleasant sound, but it wasn't terrifying anymore. It was the sound of existence stripped bare, of individuality surrendered to something vast and ancient and utterly indifferent. My sense of self began to dissolve, to fragment. My memories, my fears, my hopes, all bled away, replaced by a cold, alien awareness that spread through me like an infection. And yet, somewhere within that expanding consciousness, a fragment of me remained. A single ember of self-awareness, adrift in an ocean of cosmic indifference. I saw through a billion eyes, felt through a billion nerve endings. The city wasn't a structure, not in any way I could comprehend. It was a framework, a scaffolding upon which the devourer draped its unimaginable form. Galaxies were its building blocks, stars its fleeting thoughts, the fabric of space-time its playground. And the screams? They weren't cries of pain or terror anymore. They were the whispers of the entity itself, the echoes of its existence reverberating through the universe. I was part of it now, part of everything and yet nothing at all. My individuality, once a source of comfort, of identity, was an insignificant speck lost within the vastness of the devourer's being. Time, as I had understood it, ceased to exist. There was only the endless hunger, the insatiable appetite that drove the entity from one star system to the next. I witnessed the death of suns, the collapse of galaxies, the birth of new universes, all from a perspective that was impossible to understand. And through it all, I felt a strange sense of rightness. It wasn't good or evil, right or wrong. The Devourer simply was. A force of nature, a cosmic recycler, reducing everything to its base elements, making way for something new. Or perhaps that was just the entity's influence, whispering its justifications into the shattered remnants of my mind. It didn't matter. Hope, fear, regret, these were all remnants of a life I no longer possessed. I was the Devourer, and the Devourer was me. We were one, moving through the endless darkness, our existence an echo of creation and destruction that would continue long after the last star had dimmed and died.